Welcome, all you citizens of the world. Once again, it's Michael James with another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This one is for the week of April 27th in the year 2024, and we are recording it on Monday, April 22nd, 2024, Earth Day. Our guests today are going to be Sue Klonsky, Adam James, and Lynn Orman. And I'm going to start off with a couple of good things. The Trump trial has begun in New York, and that's a good thing. We're finally getting around to it, and hopefully next week we'll have some good news. Also, this past Thursday, 15 Kennedys were in attendance, including Kerry Kennedy, Joe Kennedy II, Christopher Kennedy, Maxwell Kennedy, and Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, all of whom are Robert F. Kennedy Jr. siblings. And many of you know that Robert F. Kennedy is running a third-party kind of campaign, and all of his sisters and brothers came out being critical of him and declaring their support for President Biden. And even if we have a lot of criticisms of President Biden, we know that he would make a much better president than the guy who is running against him. Also, some really good news was the great victory for the United Auto Workers in Chattanooga in an election. They had lost 2 times before, and the workers at Volkswagen's factory there voted overwhelmingly 2,628 to 985. That's 73% to 27%, a landslide victory. It marks the UAW's first successful unionization of a foreign-owned auto factory after a number of failed attempts, and the first unionization in many decades of a major group of workers in the non-union South. It may even mark the rebirth of a powerful union movement, something the nation has lacked over the past 40 years. And that actual information is from the American Prospect, but it's everywhere. Not as much on mainstream media as we'd like to see, but they have all basically come out and said it's an important victory. On a sad note, and we're going to talk about it with our first guest, Susan Klonsky, is the passing of Walter Slim Coleman, a renowned political activist, community organizer here in Chicago, who we've all known for a long time, and he just recently passed away. I did go to a memorial for him on Sunday. It was very, very moving. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when Susan Klonsky joins us. On the sports front, we're going to hold off until we do the Cousins Sports Report later in the show on the second half. And as we go to record this, there is breaking news here on Earth Day from the New York Times that Israel has not supported the claim that many of the employees of the main UN agency are members of a terrorist organization or organizations. That's according to a review commissioned by the UN and released on Monday. Those of you who are following the news know that protests about the Israeli invasion of Gaza and its threat to do more have had a lot of resistance. And across campuses throughout the US, there are people protesting. There's a lot of pushback saying that a lot of this is anti-Semitic. I think it's important to note that you can be critical of the Israeli government and not be anti-Semitic. We do abhor the strike by Hamas on Israel and abhor even more so the number of people that have been killed since then and the ongoing pushing back by Israel. So pay attention to that, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Another note about someone passing of some renown and brought us a lot of pleasure was Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers, and we might play his tune, Ramblin' Man, or one of his tunes sometime throughout the show. So with all that said, we'll take a short musical break, and we'll be right back with our first guest, Susan Klonsky. As I said at the outset of the show, our friend, the wonderful organizer, activist, Slim Coleman, Walter Slim Coleman, has passed, and I couldn't think of anyone more to share some information about him other than Sue Klonsky, who has been doing this now for a few of our good friends who've passed away, sharing some memories. And I asked her if she'd come on and talk about what she knew about Slim and some of the work that he did over the years. I first remember him showing up probably around the same time you did, Sue, at the SDS office. He came from Cleveland. I think you were coming from California with your husband, incomparable Michael Klonsky. And I'm not sure if I have the years correct, if they intersected, but we all knew each other back in the day from our membership in Students for Democratic Society. Tell us what you remember about meeting Slim.
Well, first of all, thanks for having this conversation, Michael. Reverend Walter Slim Coleman came up to Chicago along with his then partner and fellow organizer, Kathy Archibald. They had worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee as volunteers in Arkansas and later in Atlanta. And when that organization, known popularly as SNCC, decided to send their white volunteer members off to address racism in white communities where we came from, the then executive director of SNCC, James Foreman, directed and recommended that Slim and Kathy come to Chicago and work with Students for a Democratic Society. And so that's what happened. They showed up, and pretty soon, and they were so skilled at organizing and at figuring out suitable tactics for building the anti-war movement and linking it to the civil rights movement. We're talking about 1967, 1968. They were so skilled at it that they quickly assumed a position of major leadership within the organization here in Chicago, where our national office used to be located at the intersection of Madison and Ashland at 1608 West Madison Street, which if you look at it today, it's a parking lot. It's not, nothing is there anymore.
Should be a historical register for the SDS office.
Yeah, I'm afraid that ship has sailed. But in any case, the thing that was so interesting about Slim, and I do remember meeting him, is he was from Lubbock, Texas. He had a Texan way of speaking. He was extremely tall. I have no idea how tall he was, but to me, he looked, extremely tall, well over 6 feet. And his friends called him Slim because he was skinny as a rail. And he was often very quiet, taking in the discussions in meetings, and then coming out with one succinct statement about what he thought we ought to do in one situation or another. And sometimes we had pretty thorny and challenging situations to figure out. He was not one to fly off the handle or do anything, I think, rash or reckless. He was very thoughtful. He was highly educated. He'd been a Harvard student as an undergrad. He eventually, probably in his late 40s or so, went to Garrett Theological Seminary and became ordained and was a minister in the United Methodist Church up until his last days, having led two congregations, one in Humboldt Park called St. Adalbert's United Methodist on North Avenue, and one over in Pilsen called Lincoln United Methodist Church, which was like next door to his house. And he was always an impressive speaker. If you go on YouTube today and put his name in, you'll see him speaking in many kinds of settings, from rallies to scholarly seminars and symposia looking at the 60s and reflecting on it. And one of the best ones, if you do a little Google search for it, is a lengthy interview that he did for the documentary project called Eyes on the Prize. It's really good. And a lot of it addresses the role of white radicals in and around us and as allies to the civil rights movement. There's few people who have the breadth of experience and were able to kind of reflect on it as he did. So I value that. I've been listening to a lot of those videos and videotaped interviews the last couple days, partly just to recall that voice. Anyway, that was my first encounter with Slim, was at the SDS national office in a time of great social upheaval and turmoil. He was a very steadying voice.
That was good introduction. I remember, being in the SDS office with him. I remember driving up to Madison to an SDS meeting with him, and I remember the summer of, it was probably 67. There was I was working, I was writing for the Movement newspaper. I was working with Join Community Union, and there was a number of people, including Slim, who were doing an anti-draft summer event. And I remember being very critical of it, thinking that it would interfere with our long haul, ongoing organizing in a particular community. And later I would have to say I was totally wrong, because it just broke wide open people who were opposed to the war. But I remember that summer when there were a number of people, and there was a debate in the Movement newspaper, basically between my position on pretty critical of that, and a number of people who were going to take the war to the neighborhoods. Do you remember anything about that summer?
Well, I know that summer in Madison, Wisconsin, there was a national conference on organizing draft resistance, encouraging young people to avoid the draft, to avoid being sent off to the meat grinder that was the Vietnam War. And it was called by the Wisconsin Draft Resistance Union, which was a student-based organization in Madison. And an astonishing number of people showed up from far-flung parts of the country, including rural areas in like Idaho. And it spun off a number of projects, including what they called GI coffee houses. You may remember these.
Oh,
They
yes.
were places where active duty soldiers, whether they were drafted or enlistees, could come and meet like-minded people and find out what to do, find others who were thinking along the same lines as them, who were hearing from guys coming back from Vietnam about how terrible the situation was and how stupid and destructive the war was. Anyways, there were many people who are still organizing today who were a part of that movement, and that project was part of what was called Vietnam Summer, the summer of 1967, when a lot of money was raised all over the country to support organizing against the draft, which was driving more and more people to oppose the war. Not just out of self-interest, but because they were seeing how needless, senseless, and destructive it was, not just, of course, for ourselves, but for the millions of Vietnamese and other people in Southeast Asia who got killed and maimed by the U.S. war that was supposedly to stop communism in Southeast Asia. He was a strategic part of that movement.
Yeah, back in the day, it was started off with everyone was for the war in Vietnam. By the end of the war, it was 70% of the people were opposed to the war, and it happened very quickly. Later, people wanted to bomb Iraq. They forgot that they had been opposed to the Vietnam War, but that's another question. The thing that comes up a lot, and that Slim gets a lot of credit for, is the organizing of voter registration here in Chicago to elect Harold Washington. How about
Yes.
sharing with our listeners and our viewers some of that? Because a lot of us, all of us were involved in bringing Harold into office, and it was one of the greatest moments in Chicago history. And he played a major part in that. Slim did.
Indeed, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Because he had experienced the really life or death struggles to register voters in the Black Belt South, in Arkansas, in Sunflower County, in the Southwest Georgia, and he understood it well. He understood how to talk to people about the importance of it and what it meant in terms of gaining some political power in this city. When Harold Washington was first approached, he was a U.S. congressman at that time. He was approached to run for mayor of Chicago. He was very dismissive of those who approached him, most of whom were Black civil rights leaders, Southsiders such as the late, great Timuel Black, Lou Palmer, and many others. He said, no, unless you can show me that you can register 150,000 voters and raise $250,000. And over the course of the next few months, through careful planning and organizing, we registered 250,000 voters, new voters citywide, but particularly on the south and west sides. And Slim led the effort to register voters and to get out the vote subsequently on the north and northwest side. And that was no small accomplishment. The skillful combination of community organizing and outreach to people in all different kinds of organizations, coming to them around issues that were important to them and that were being neglected. And secondly, the nascent campaign succeeded in raising $250,000. And they were able to go back to Harold Washington and say, well, we got 250,000 new voters and we got $250,000. What do you say now? And he said, well, you got me. And so he ran, and because of his particular dynamism and charisma, plus his extreme brilliance as an orator and his tireless campaigning, it was possible to make it happen and to beat the pants off the machine. So Slim was kind of one of the key people responsible for organizing outside the Black community. There were many other people who played an incredibly important role. Some of them veterans of the civil rights movement, some of them young people who just got fired up and turned on by the very idea that there could be a different way of governing in Chicago. And he was able to capture a lot of that energy. In fact, I remember very well going to a community meeting in my neighborhood at a church on the northwest side, where Slim and a very young Black state legislator by the name of Monica Faith Stewart, African-American young woman, she was the youngest person to ever serve in the Illinois legislature at that time, gave a pitch to us to get out and get the clipboards and work the wards and get people signed up. And they were inspirational. They got people on their feet.
That was a great campaign, that the Harold Washington campaign, and it ushered in a growing trend toward the progressive people in the city council, and perhaps in the mayorship too. We'll see how that all plays out. You know, Slim Coleman ended up he spent some time in Uptown and they put out a paper, Keep Strong. He was very much involved with Helen Schiller, who became an alderwoman. They all worked together. He then, a little bit later, got involved with immigrant rights and did some work with Congressman Gutierrez and helped to get him elected. And he received a lot of attention. And one of the top stories back in 2006 was when a young woman named Elvira Arellano took refuge in the church when ICE, or whatever the forces that be, wanted to deport. Share a little bit about that time.
Well, that's exactly right. She was willing and able to be a test case of the sanctuary policy and its enforceability. And she had a young son. I think he was like maybe 6 or 8 years old at the time, and they stayed in the church for quite some time. It was more than a year. I'm not sure exactly how many months they were there. There were immense rallies and prayer services and downstairs in the church, and there was a little apartment upstairs. And she was able to stay out of the hands of ICE and continue. And, this was before the internet and before, FaceTime and like what we're doing now, before being able to do outreach to people with the ease that we have it now. And he was able to get the word out. And I very well remember being so moved by the fact that you would see people coming and dropping off like sacks of groceries and stuff at the church for the Arianos and to keep the project going, because she became a symbol for the sanctuary movement. And in fact, when Harold was the mayor, he was the one who enacted the welcoming city or sanctuary city ordinance as by executive order that some folks have recently tried to undo because they're afraid Chicago's getting too crowded. But he stood up against that very strongly.
There is a book out called Elvira's Faith, which is
Yes.
The Fight for Immigration Reform, a view from the grassroots. And it's Slim wrote a lot of it. There are other people in it too.
Yeah.
And just so I don't forget, there is going to be a memorial service, a citywide memorial service for him on May 30th, 6 to 8 at Operation Push, which is at 930 East 50th Street. And we'll mention it over and over before that. Thanks a lot. And everybody else, we're going to take a musical break and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. It's time for our sports report. And once again, I've got Cousin Adam out there in California going to give us a little bit of news and his views on the world of sport. Regular listeners know that he not only is an actor, a martial artist, producer of a new show that's coming along, and he played football at Northwestern, and he'll have some news about Northwestern and the football team. Take it away, Adam. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you so much for having me. Hello to everybody out there and Live from the Heartland. It's great to be here again. Yes, for those of you in the Chicago area who love Northwestern, love college football or college sports, there's a lot of activity going on with the Northwestern program. I just want to give you some quick highlights. So last year, the season started off with a big challenge, major challenges, major concerns, but they righted the ship under the leadership of the new head coach, Coach Braun, who led them to an amazing season. They got to a bowl game, the Las Vegas Bowl. They won that game and looked really great doing it. So there's a lot of positive momentum for the program. But one thing that was happening for this entire university and their sports programs is the stadium that they played at, which when I was playing there was called Dyke Stadium and then was renamed Ryan Field, needed more than a makeover. It needed a clean swipe and a reboot. So they've actually are completely eliminating the old Ryan Field and building a brand new state-of-the-art stadium. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about the stadium, Michael, and I was talking to you about this the other night, is that it's small. Most of the stadiums in college football are 60, 70,000. Of course, up in Michigan, it's 120,000 now. But this stadium will only seat about 30, 35,000, I believe it is. But it's going to be tricked out with every high-tech gadget and gizmo, super comfortable chairs. It's supposed to be one of the best viewing experiences when it's completed in all of athletics. Now, but the interesting story and what I want to share with everybody out there in Live from the Heartland is it's going to take 2 years to build this stadium. So there was a lot of discussion with the Northwestern University leaders and the football team of where they were going to play. So, of course, Wrigley Field has been the home for Northwestern on a few occasions over the last few years. Greatly appreciate the leadership there, allowing the team to play there. However, there's a team that plays there regularly. So getting in that stadium on a regular basis might be a little challenging. Same thing with Soldier Field. Plus, they're really expensive to rent them out. So there was some talk about Northwestern maybe playing at the Chicago Fire Stadium over there on the far west side of Chicago. about a 30-mile drive out of Evanston. So a lot of the students and the fans based in Evanston weren't too keen on that, although it's a beautiful stadium and it would have been a great option. But they came up with a really creative idea. So what they're going to do is, oh, by the way, if you didn't know this, they built an amazing new athletic center on the Northwestern campus, right on Lake Michigan. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's part of the new commitment to the athletic teams, all of them, not just football, but football in particular is getting a lot of that, that attention over there. Well, there's a beautiful open field right next to the new Martin Athletic Facility. And the field is where the soccer team and the lacrosse team play regularly. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to build temporary seating, 15,000 seats around this little stadium. Now, it's going to be really small, but it's going to be an absolutely gorgeous viewing experience right on Lake Michigan. You're going to be able to look right down at downtown Chicago. It's going to be something special. Now, they are going to have a couple games with some major opponents that bring a big fan base with them. The University of Illinois, our rivals, fighting the Illini, and Ohio State University Buckeyes are coming up this year, and they're probably going to play at Wrigley or Soldier Field, one of those, or both of them. They haven't announced that yet. And the other one that I'm hearing is maybe going up to Lambeau Field when they play Wisconsin. So there's some more news coming out about all this, but it's just really exciting for all of us at Northwestern and with Northwestern alumni about the new things happening with the football program.
I hadn't known that until you told me the other day. I did know that. I've been following, and we've had not only you, but we had Jeff Smith on, who's a longtime Evanston activist,
Yes.
talking about tearing down Dyke Stadium or Ryan Field.
Yes.
And I didn't know they had changed the name. I had forgotten that. I liked it when it was called Dyke Stadium. And there was a lot of pushback from neighbors, but it was mainly because they were going to also do concerts there. And
Absolutely.
some question about the new mayor and him going along with it when he had been a long time kind of a progressive activist. I'm fine with them building a new stadium as long as Mustard's last stand is still there, where you can get a good hot dog or Polish sausage will be fine.
Absolutely.
And I haven't actually been in that stadium since you played there. But speaking of football, and we're just into the baseball season, and basketball is in its, the playoff mode. The beloved Bulls are out, and they really got creamed the other day by Miami.
They did in that game, but let's give it up for the Chicago Bulls. They played really hard this year. They have a really good core group. DeRozan is spectacular, and hopefully they're going to run it back next year and go even further. They had a really good, that first play-in game. They won at home and looked really strong, and it was great for the fans who were able to be there that night. But yeah, they went down to Miami and were a little spent, and they came up short that night. But, hopefully they're going to have a strong season next year. And then likewise,
Alonzo Ball is back. That'll be a big thing, and if we keep some of the guys we have, I'm not sure how it'll all shake out, but I do got to say that I've really come to love watching the Bulls.
yes.
Well, let's
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about football, because when this show airs on the 27th, we'll be in the heat of the NFL draft.
Exactly. And of course, the Chicago Bears have the pick number 1. Most likely, they're going to be taking this amazing football player, quarterback out of the University of Southern California. And he is a terrific player and has a great future ahead of him. But what I'm going to ask our listeners out there to do is tune in to the Friday, and even better yet, the Saturday draft, because that's when you have a really intriguing situation. You have teams drafting players who maybe aren't as well known, maybe haven't done as well at the college level, but show amazing potential. And this is where those who really strategize and watch the game, and those who play fantasy football, are these types, is you're looking at those unusual players and who drafts them in those late rounds, and then later cultivates them and makes them into some terrific player down the road. So for those draft nicks out there, tune in Friday and Saturday to the NFL draft. But no doubt about it, there's a lot of sports going on right now, Michael. We've got baseball, the basketball, hockey is entering the playoffs right now for the Stanley Cup. Terrific sports action. But there's one great big sporting event coming up this summer, and that's the Olympics. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the Olympics, our United States teams that are heading over there. You were saying the other day that you like to watch more than just the U.S. teams. You like to watch some of the other countries' athletes.
I love watching all the people from everywhere. And I did used to root a lot for the socialist countries. Like I always rooted for Cuba, and I
Yes.
still like Cuba a lot. But I do love my country, even though I've been critical of the government off and on all my life. Um, and I'm really excited. I love watching the track and field, uh,
Yes.
and particularly women's events these days. I mean, women, sports, particularly like basketball and volleyball, have really shot to the top. And I'm sure that's true with women's track too.
Absolutely. And hopefully more so. Now, track is kind of an unusual sport in that it doesn't have nearly the passionate following that these sports teams can generate. And it has a lot to do with how they market themselves. But the athletes themselves are sensational. And if we're able to market them more and get them more recognition and more compensation, I think it's really good for our sports world.
That's good. That's good. What else you got? I mean, I know you root for the Yankees or for the Dodgers, one of
I
those
do.
teams. Uh, what are you thinking about baseball in the short period of time we've been playing this year?
Well, gosh, baseball is in a unique position in a lot of ways when you look at it from a business standpoint. They, from in many ways, had lost some momentum in regards to their fan base. So there's some reports showing that a lot of the fans of baseball are older generations of sports fans, that they're not doing as well captivating the younger generation. I believe that baseball has been doing a better job of that. And I see more and more young baseball fans, especially here in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, there's such a passionate following of the Dodgers, especially for the Hispanic community, the Mexican American community. They just absolutely adore that team. They're totally locked in. And that's really great to see. And that's where, to me, marketing is smart. When you connect with the community and you build that bond, that absolute passion in the fans. I know that Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox do a great job of that as well. But there was another thing that came out recently in a report about baseball, and it's just going back to the business standpoint and how it's changing and growing and has some challenges. And that has to do with the number of African American players. It's actually dropped one of the lowest levels ever. We just celebrated Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball. And we also wanted to take a moment to pause and look at the fact that it's becoming something that is absolutely booming worldwide. We've got amazing baseball players coming over from Asia, from Taiwan, South Korea, and of course, Japan. We also have this enormous influx of players from the Caribbean, Latin America, Mexico. And yet we are seeing less and less African American players. And so that's a concern. And what we want to do as passionate sports fans, of passionate baseball advocates, is help get the game going out there in the community. Try to help organize and support. It's something I've mentioned many times on the show is if you're a fan of sports, don't just watch it, get out there and do it. Play it if you can, but support it any way that you can. You might want to volunteer to be a sports team manager, or if you're an expert in marketing, maybe call up your local minor league team and say, hey, can I help you get more fans coming out to the stadium? That's the key to helping grow the sports, in my opinion.
Adam, you mentioned all the players coming from other parts of the world and the proliferation of the game and the attraction to the game worldwide. Why do you think it is that there are fewer African American players? I mean, I don't think it's a question of racism. I think it might have something to do with uh, so many African American athletes going into basketball, going into football, and being a major segment of both of those sports, and even into soccer all of a sudden.
Correct. Well, a couple
You
things
see
you want
that?
to think about that is regards to the economies of our sports. Basketball, you need a net, you need a hoop and a backboard, and you need the ball, but in a hard court to bounce it on. But that's pretty much it. And a lot of public parks will have that. Baseball is different. You need a bunch of people. You need 9. Actually, you need 18, 9 on each side to really play it right. You need that hard ball and you need that hard bat. And those can be really dangerous too. So you don't see it played as much and as easily. Soccer, oftentimes people joke about the fact with soccer, you don't even need a ball. In some of these really areas of the world where they're really challenged economically, they'll take a bunch of shirts, tie them up real tight, and make that into a ball. And they'll go out there and play soccer or football, as they would call it. And you hit on the right thing, though, Michael. It comes back to economics. A lot of these young African-American athletes, they have tremendous potential athletically in whatever they put their mind to. And they see how well these basketball players and football players are doing. And they're like, I'm going to do that. Same thing with boxing and MMA. Those are other ones that are really doing well. And you see a lot of great young African-American athletes, men and women, in those combat sports. And I applaud that.
Well, Adam, this has been good. You got any parting words of inspiration for our listeners and viewers?
Well, gosh, just to go back to what I said earlier, I love sports. I love watching them, but I love doing them even more. And that's what I would share with everybody out there is be a sports fan if you like, but be an athlete always. Get out there and play, have fun, get involved. And if you're not able to do it physically as well as you'd like, because again, everybody can do something. But if it's not to the level you'd like to do and really want to still be in there, volunteer in other ways. We all need assistance. And these sports teams out there need fans, they need advocates, they need managers, they need people to help.
That's good. I'm going to ask you one more thing. I know you're getting an award, which we were going to talk about when you get it, but you could give us a little clue about the martial arts award that you got coming up.
Well, we haven't made the announcement yet, so I'll hold, if I may, on that.
Okay.
But we've got some special announcement coming up in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. I'll be sharing more. But yes, thank you so much for all the love and support, the aloha that I get here from the Heartland, as well as across the country in Hawaii. Obviously, I'm very grateful for all the support that I've received.
Yeah, Adam grew up in Hawaii. He played football at Punahou before he went to Northwestern. And I always like talking to your cousin. And you fill me in on a lot of details. So we're going to take a musical break, and we're going to be right back with our final guest, the one and only Lynn Orman, who is our musical producer. And she's going to give us a little update about festivals, people playing around town, what's going on that people can enjoy the music and the warm weather here in the Windy City. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of April 27th. Once again, I'm Michael James, and I'm here now with our wonderful music producer, the one and only Lynn Orman. This woman runs all over town, taking in concerts, taking in shows, introducing us to interesting musicians and people, supporting their families, their health care. And she's going to wind up this week's show with a little bit of information about what's going on in this big, wonderful city of Chicago. So, Lynn, how are you today?
Hi, Michael. How are you? Happy to be here with you. Sorry, I'm sitting in my office, which is my car.
It works.
Yeah, well, sadly, some of the equipment in my office, car office, has been vandalized. So I'm hoping this all works today.
We're doing good. We're on the phone, not your computer, because lo and behold, Lynn had her car broken into. So with that said, we're going to move on to the Chicago information. Chicago has announced its lineup for the summer festivals. Tell us what's happening in Millennium Park.
Well, it's going to kick off with a great house music festival, which is, we're talking June. June is festival month. I mean, actually starting the end of May. And I can't believe we're here in almost summertime. But Chicago house music is, it is the epicenter of where house music started. I remember back in the day years ago, Tommy Boy and Rocky Jones. And so Millennium Park will kick off with house music, then gospel festival, and then blues festival, which, of course, I am passionate about. And it's opening this year with two Alligator, which is a Chicago record label, recording artists, Shamika Copeland, the daughter of Johnny Copeland, who she just had a show at Space in Evanston, and it was sold out. And let me tell you, if you have not seen Shamika, along with, she calls him her big brother, it is the son of Ronnie Baker Brooks, and they will be opening Chicago Blues Festival this year. It's going to be a really, really great time. The night before Blues Fest kicks off on Thursday evening, I believe it's the 6th of June. And on the 5th of June, there is going to be a Women in Blues concert featuring all of Delmark Records women. And that's going to be a really big concert with a lot of the artists that we've featured and premiered on Live from the Heartland radio show, including Buddy Guy's daughter, Carly Guy, Cheryl Youngblood, who is unbelievable, Joanna Connor, who, if your listeners have been to Kingston Mines, know she is the queen of the 6-string guitar. So, and the festival will culminate on Sunday evening. Now, supposedly, word has it that this is the last concert that Buddy Guy will do. It is the ending of his farewell tour. And so he is going to be there on Sunday night. And then somewhere there in the middle, which I'm not sure which day, they are doing a tribute to Dinah Washington, who is from the south side of Chicago.
Nice.
So that's going to be pretty wonderful. And people can go to choose, CHOOSE, Chicago.org to find out information on Chicago, all of the festivals that are going on this summer.
You know, there's a lot of talk in Chicago always about downtown, but one of the things that we've done for years is talk about our neighborhoods. And,
Right.
you know, we can't go through all the neighborhoods, and I'm sure there are events everywhere, but I know there's some festival stuff and music in Hyde Park, Oak Park, Berwyn, and of course, our home base, Rogers Park. What do you got
Yeah.
for neighborhood music?
Well, Glenwood Arts Festival is always fabulous. That's at the end of the summer, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But
Yep.
I used to produce the Blues Alley, which was on Friday night, which I think you had been to. Wonderful part of the festival. So that's going to be in August, end of August, I believe. But in Hyde Park, there is going to be a lot going on at the brand new garden next to Muddy Waters' house. And you'll have to come out with me, Michael. It's the Mojo Museum, but it's their outdoor garden right next door. They just purchased that lot, or they've gotten a lot of grants, historic landmark grants and Chicago grants. And so they have it there. A lot in Bronzeville. And of course, going out to the west side, they're doing a lot more of the festivals in Austin. DK's puts those on, which is really fantastic. The Promontory, of course, is going to be having their summer lineup. I'm sorry, I don't have, because my computer's gone, I don't have all of that lineup, but I will make a link available to our listeners
Okay,
for
that's
us.
good. And we'll have you on again, but let's round this out with some people that you're very close to and have been very supportive of. Talk about a few Chicago legends who've had birthdays or are about to celebrate their birthday.
Okay.
Tell us
Can-
about Irwin. Tell us about George. Tell us about Ella.
Well, George Freeman just turned 97 years old, and they just did his annual 10th anniversary birthday celebration at the Green Mill in Uptown, which was out of this world. He always has his great jazz band. You could hear a pin drop in that room, and he played like he was 27, not 97. And Bernard Pretty Purdy, who is the most recorded drummer in the world, flew in to be a part of that celebration. Erwin Helfer, there is a concert that's going to be at the Old Town School of Folk Music. Not sure of the date on that one, but just beloved piano player who we have had on many times. And Ella Jenkins will be turning 100 years old on August 6th. And can I round out and say a lot of festivals are going to be in the suburbs this summer. Skokie, believe it or not, and Winnetka. The North Shore Center for the Performing Arts is having their first outdoor festival. Larkin Poe, who just won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Blues Artist, The Empty Pockets, The Bones of Junior Jones, Mike Campbell and the Dirty Knobs. And then on Saturday, Grace Potter, who I love, and coming back, who we haven't seen in a long time, J.C. Brooks Band. And that's going to be over by the golf putting area in Skokie at Oakton and McCormick, and then Out of Space, which is usually at the Canal Shores in Evanston, will be taking part in the Tech Park in Skokie in July. And also the Winnetka Blues Festival is going to have Band of Horses and the Rebirth Blues Band. So lots going on a little bit north of Rogers Park.
That's great to hear, Lynn. I'm glad we're going to have a lot of music up to the north. There could be an invasion of the North Shore suburbs by a lot of Chicago folks. I want to thank everybody who made this show possible. This week, our guests were Sue Klonsky talking about the late, great Slim Coleman. Adam James gave us a little update on sports and motivation, and Lynn Orman filled us in with some music. Next week, we've got Lauren Deutsch, who is a great photographer and ran the Jazz Institute. She'll be on. And last week, we had Tommy Carden on labor and Trevor Toppin out of Valhalla's Music on Record Store Day. And those are interesting interviews you might want to check out. So with all that said, and with our time running out, let's just say, everybody do good in the world. The world needs all the good you do, I do, we do together, because together we can make a big difference. And the pressure is on us to make a better world. Okay, see you next week. Over and out.